Good evening slash afternoon slash early morning, depending on where you are. This is, of course, the internet, and this is an international podcast that we call Recruiting EQ. Thanks very much for joining us. This is Recruiting EQ episode 84. Somehow, every time I am incredulous about the episode number, and yet here we are at 84. Thank you for joining us. This is a little bit different than we normally do. Usually, we're live at noon Eastern Standard Time on Wednesdays. But this is a pre-recorded episode, Tuesday night at 8 p.m. for me. And the reason for that is because our wonderful guests, one of our wonderful guests anyhow, is in Singapore. What time is it now for you, Aksinia?
Hi, Rick. It's 9:09 a.m. I just finished a walk with my kids. So
that's awesome. It is, yeah, we're like 13-hour difference.
Yep.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for being here, you guys. This is Ala and Aksinia from Burnout Lab. I really appreciate you coming on because this is a topic that we've touched on numerous times in this podcast. Before we get rolling heavily, I'd love to, if you guys would just introduce yourselves and a little bit about what you do.
Sure, yeah. Hi, Rick. It's a pleasure to be at your podcast. And wow, 84 sounds like a good number.
It's a beautiful number.
So my name is Aksinia, and my professional background is human resources. I come from recruitment, and exactly during that time, well-being triggered my interest. So back in the days when I lived in Toronto, I started and managed this company, Find Staffing Solutions. We did recruitment for government sector in Canada, all levels of government, provincial, municipal, and some requests we had from the federal government even, which was a lot of fun, as you can imagine. And the company lived for over 10 years, and it's still there. It's now called Info Staffing. But I have moved on into other things. So after my HR career, I went in to do my MBA at IMD in Switzerland, and then straight into the doctorate at Bocconi University in Milan. So currently I'm doing my doctoral, and this is on burnout prevention, and I work for Burnout Lab, and also doing some lecturing here in Singapore.
Awesome. And you're the co-founder of Burnout Lab, as if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
Awesome. Ella?
Hi, Rick, Aksinia. Rick, thank you for having us today here. My name is Alla Korolko, and I started my career as a recruiter because of Aksinia. She introduced me to recruitment, and I started working at her company. And then continued with recruitment. And during that time, I interviewed hundreds, probably thousands of candidates every day. And I would ask them, personal questions like what drives them, what holds them back. And I realized that almost every single person, every candidate I've talked to went through burnout at some point of their lives. And, that got me curious. And that got me in, especially after Aksinia introduced me to, her idea of Burnout Lab and what they're doing. I got really excited, and now I'm a growth partner, and we are expanding Burnout into different countries now.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, yeah, thanks you guys for being here on this. I have so many questions for you. Mostly about the phenomenon of burnout. Like, why did you guys start this company in the first place? Or Aksinia, I guess I'll ask you that as co-founder. Like, what brought you? You're doing your education in burnout. So, what brought you to study or even do a doctorate in burnout prevention in the first place?
Sure, yeah. So, already while running Find Staffing Solutions, I've watched consultants work incredible hours, sacrificing their health and sleep. And I always wondered whether that was even sustainable. And now looking back and being connected with some of those, people who build the highest number of hours are not so well health-wise. I'm not sure whether there is a causality. There's always very difficult to establish that, but it's definitely something I'm noticing. And so during the year, at my MBA, I also noticed how the group dynamics were so kind of damaged because of the stress and the tiredness, the mental health issues, that it really had an impact on the performance. And so for me at that time was already clear that I'm very interested in the topic of well-being, and already researched a lot by then. And so I went straight into burnout prevention, and it got even more interested during my journey when I started seeing what other organizations are experiencing, when I started doing some of the consulting on the topic.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, staffing, recruiting, and any kind of sales, really, kind of environments tend to have a lot of stress, right? People are putting in long hours. They're motivated by money to a large extent. Some of the environments, especially like years ago, were a lot more toxic too, I would imagine, like with, kind of like fear, running by fear, essentially, people getting yelled at if they're not staying late and all that kind of stuff.
Well, the toxic environment at work is still among the highest reasons for workplace burnout. So while the cultures have become better, we still see a lot of toxicity on the workplace. And you said it right, sales, any high availability demand jobs do tend to burn out quickly.
It's an interesting balance, right? Because when you ask people for whom, here, wait, hang on. This is my cat. You can see in the background. Look at her go. This is Karen. She makes appearances
Hi, Karen.
in podcasts. I know. We named her Karen for a reason. Here, I'm going to let her out of the office.
Yeah, so I guess I'll share something personal while you're away. In research, they say research is me search.
Oh, yeah.
And kind of also the why behind what I'm doing is that I usually show this picture during my training. I'm standing happily with my team in Toronto. There's like 10 of us, and we're celebrating 8 years anniversary of Fine Staffing Solutions. And everyone is looking very happy, including me. But this is the time, 2 days after that, I couldn't come to work anymore. And that's the issue with mental health, right? Chronic stress is very often suffered silently. Like when someone is having a disease or a cancer and everyone knows the person is going through chemo, we can support that person openly. But when someone is having a mental health issue, it is very often not seen by others. And that's also the why behind the work.
Yeah, and I'm glad you went there. I was planning on going there down the road, but so it's good that Karen needed to leave then, so we got this part of the topic going. One of the things I put in the write-up for this event too is I was looking at some of the things you guys share on the Burnout Lab LinkedIn page, the New York Times article, etc. And it occurred to me that it's like I've been through a couple of pretty severe burnouts when I was younger, I dropped out of school to start a record label. I was playing in multiple bands. I was on the radio doing night shifts. I was working a day job 3 days a week to do day shifts. And I almost had liver failure, right, at 19 years old, because you burn out, right? You have to sleep and eat food, things I thought I was, indestructible or whatever. But because of going through those things, I can sometimes see in other people as a recruiter that they're really burnt out or that they're suffering from being in a toxic environment. But it seems like they're not even aware necessarily that they're suffering from those symptoms. Is that something that you touch on too? Like that you've seen that sometimes people think, oh, this is just what work is. I don't even realize that I am suffering from any kind of symptoms at all.
Of course, yeah. So this is kind of that generation, right? Our generation. Currently, the international schools and even public schools have stress management as a subject. And stress management is a skill that you need to develop. It's something that you go to the gym. It's the same as mental health. Stress management is a skill that you develop through life, and you need to understand how the stress works psychologically, biologically. And if you have that understanding in your high school or in the university, if you're taught that, then throughout life, you understand how to manage stress. You understand when the chronic stress is accumulated and leading you to burnout. So you understand that process. If you're lacking that knowledge, like our generations, we were never taught burnout. My mother worked 3 jobs, and she didn't have she didn't have that luxury to burn out in Russia. So I feel like what we're doing at Burnout Lab, we're kind of filling that gap of knowledge. We're going back to the workplace for the generations that never learned that, and the people who are managing stress kind of intuitively, or when the body tells us, okay, now you need to sleep, you just pass out. So yes, to kind of make it a bit shorter, I agree that some people don't realize they're burning out, and that's when the management has to come in. That's when the leadership has to come in to help them understand that they are burning out and take steps to improve that.
Understood. Alla, what's your relationship to burnout as well? Like that inspired you to be involved in this? Obviously, Aksinia is studying it in school, but what's your relationship to burnout prevention?
I actually went through burnout myself, and a couple of years ago, when I was going through burnout, I knew what to do. I knew that there is something I can do, and that was playing sports that would help me stay healthy and mentally aware what's happening, and I knew I have to play tennis because I play tennis, and that's one of the best ways to get stress out of your body is to play some sports, exercise, or physical activities. And I couldn't tell my boss or anyone at work that actually I'm going through that, because there is still stigma attached to that. You can't share at work that actually I'm going through something, there is some, if you say mental health problems or you're going through something challenging. So instead of telling, and I knew I have to play some sports, do some activities, and instead of telling my boss, because I knew I couldn't just tell him, I need to, during lunch, twice a week, I have to go and do activities, play sports. So instead of doing that, I had to actually tell them, I have some back issues, so I need to do physiotherapy. Okay. And this way they would understand, because this is real. Back issue is real.
Yeah.
Burnout is something that, exactly. And I wish we had more awareness, and I wish in a workplace environment we had more understanding that so many people are going through that, including myself. I went through that, had that experience. So now with Burnout Lab, I hope we're going to bring that awareness to people, to the workplaces, and the CEOs of the companies that should be investing in the mental health of their employees.
Yeah, for sure. I find it interesting that you say that, when you were going through burnout, your solution was to play sports, was to play tennis. I feel like a lot of people feel like when they're burning out, that it's not doing something, it's doing less, seems to be their solution. And I personally did not find that worked for me. Just doing nothing and just sort of, the tendency then is to, in my case anyway, to go into sort of a mini depression, essentially, where you're just kind of like, oh my God, I'm burnt out. What am I going to do? And you're just going back into the same scenario. So then, like, doing nothing isn't really a solution to burnout. It isn't really rest in a real way. Does that track, or how do you guys feel about that?
So I believe what we see when we coach individuals with burnout is it depends on the level of burnout. And, have you ever seen these matches from 1 to 8 or from 1 to 6? The first match is kind of normal, and then the next one is a bit burned, less, and then the last one is completely burned down. So this is actually a scientific test. There is a paper on that where you can use this scale to understand what's the level of someone's burnout, either 6 or an 8. I can send you that paper. It's very interesting.
Please, yeah, I'll share it on LinkedIn.
Yeah, so I think burnout is an overused word. When you're really burnt out, the people who are really burnt out are often scared to leave their house. They're scared to go to the workplace. Like, we've seen so many different cases, and in some cases it goes into depression. It's right, even though it's very two different things. So I believe it depends the level. It's very important. So when you're when you have accumulated chronic stress, evolutionary biology tells us you need to kind of run from that animal, right? Because we're still we've evolved very quickly. So the sport is one of the things we need to recover when we're in the beginning of this accumulation of chronic stress. And when it goes way further, we really lose that physical ability to even want that, and that we're a bit more down and we cannot do anything.
Yeah, that's interesting, and I think that the education piece is a great place to start, right? Because I think it's individuals don't really know how to find out if they're suffering from burnout, how far along they are, what the stressors are. Like you mentioned before, it's a generational thing, but speaking to a lot of people who are like, I was born in 81, so I'm like turning 45 soon, right? So I'm kind of at the cusp of Generation X and the beginning of millennials. When I speak to people who are Gen Z, though, they're extremely conscious of having to rest and having to protect their mental health. But at times it goes so far as to almost avoid, like, their distress tolerance is very low, which bothers hiring managers. And then you get into this weird loop where hiring managers think that Gen Z people are lazy because they're unwilling to do work or whatever. There's all this sort of like unhealthy stigma on both sides that I think could be solved with this kind of education piece that you're talking about. You know what I mean?
I agree with you 100%. I mean, during our training, we talk about stress not being bad, but actually being good, because it makes us stronger, it makes us grow, it makes us more resilient. So if we don't push, we don't become better.
Yeah.
As simple as that. So it is good to push, and we want them to go all the way. It's just it's a very delicate line, right? And I agree with you. We see that as well. We see employers kind of making those comments about Gen Z. They're too much into the mental health, and when they didn't know these things, and I believe it comes down to the education. 100%. It's a gift that an employer can give to their employees, this kind of stress management training, management and resiliency training. It's called SMART.
Yeah, I like the stress management and resiliency. So it's like both sides of the coin, right?
Exactly.
Like I remember I've tried many personal trainers in my life, and I had one most recently who really changed the game for me, because he was talking about the idea of thinking about how you feel when you're doing the exercise properly and trying to notice the difference in the feeling. And then once you start to feel resistance to the pain that you're feeling, to keep going and map out the pain. And he's like, you register it as pain because it's an unknown threshold, right? So your body worries, you feel anxiety. It's like, ooh, this is new and different. He's like, but the new area, that's where you get the benefit. So you need to up your resilience to get into that new frightening area. But it's about diagnosing the difference between an injury kind of pain and what we perceive as pain because we're afraid of something new, which I thought was fascinating.
Oh, yeah, I love that. And that's kind of that optimal performance before going into the strain. So it goes from boredom to burnout, right? And so when we are a little bit challenged, we're just slightly challenged, we're still not at our capacity. Then when we're challenged maximally, nicely, then we're at this optimal performance point. And when we're challenged too much, we go a bit of in a strain, which is okay sometimes, just not to fall into a burnout. So thanks for sharing it. Can I ask you something, Rick?
Sure, please.
So let's just talk kind of intuitively. When you think of stress management and kind of bringing it into your practice, what would be the questions you'd ask your candidates during the interview to understand whether they know about stress management, what's their resiliency level? Do you ask something like this?
Yeah, I don't usually use the terms. I'll be honest with you. I don't use the terms, but then again, I'm not really educated on the terms. So I don't want like I wouldn't be able to tell, like, in this podcast, I'd love to ask you even to sort of break down a little bit about what you've said too, because I feel like this could be a good education tool for me and other recruiters to sort of start asking those questions. What I usually do is I had for reasons that we don't need to get into in the podcast right now, I had the luxury of doing dialectical behavior therapy training, and was actually going to be a volunteer coach with a therapist to do these group sessions, right? And I love the dialectical behavior therapy ideas because it's about active listening, and it's about sort of, checking in with your feelings and the other person's feelings. And there's a whole list of, techniques and what's the word I'm looking for? Skills that you can use to prevent yourself from burning out when you're having relational interactions with people, but also to be able to tell when someone is emotionally dysregulated or is behaving irrationally or is behaving defensively or is exhibiting a fear of abandonment or fear of, different things that you get when you're relationally stressed out, or they use the term dysregulated. That's kind of where I come from on it, is to sort of try and see by talking to them open-ended and seeing, how do you feel about your job? How do you feel about recruitment? What's the culture like? And then, you guys have seen this too. It goes down a rabbit hole. If you establish rapport and people open up, you get a pretty clear picture of where they're at mentally, emotionally from there.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, that's great. I mean, you're trying to understand their emotional profile, how they manage their emotions. Yeah, I mean, asking some of the stress questions would also just bring you a step further.
I would love to know how. Please tell me. What do you think? Because again, this is an education piece for me too. What do you think would be a way to approach this with a candidate even?
Mm-hmm. So the way to approach this with a candidate is probably when we think about the people function in the organization, we're building the team, and this is where you come in, right? Identifying the team player, creating the position, and then establishing the recruitment process. Then we have valuing our team, compensation. I'm talking about if it's a company.
Sure, yeah.
Valuing your team, compensation package, benefits, HRIS system. And then there's developing your team, where you're educating them, making sure there's continuing education, there's feedback on performance, and then there's keeping your team. This is company culture, compliance, employee retention, and things like that. So for each of those 4 kind of columns within the people function, there is a way to introduce well-being. So in the recruitment process, those would be questions like, how do you manage stress? How do you rate your physical well-being? Like, how many hours of sleep do you need? Things about that they would tell you whether how is the person managing their kind of stress management profile. How is your relationship with your device? How is your digital well-being? Because that one is now huge, and this is part of actually my actual PhD topic, digital burnout within entrepreneurs. So some of the questions you can ask at the interview to understand whether the person even kind of understands the topic and has the awareness about managing their stress muscles.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think if you asked me when I was 25 years old how I managed stress, I would say beer. And I would be not lying. I would be joking, but I would be very honest. Like, that's just how I managed my stress, was to have drinks. I lived in Montreal. It was completely normalized. We had drinks at work, sometimes at lunch. You know what I mean? With clients and whatever else, being in tech sales, right? So it's funny. It's like, that, of course, would show that I had absolutely zero stress management skill, because it's not a valid stress management skill. It's obviously not taking care of your health.
Of course not. Yeah, but this is the kind of things we talk during the training. And, the training is 8 hours. It's a full day training. So, for example, when I have people from the hospitals here, they send doctors and nurses. We spend the whole day outside of the hospital setting. And in the beginning, everyone is kind of quiet. But by the end, I know all their stress management techniques. We discuss them all. We discuss whether shopping is it actually a therapy, or it's just a dopamine boost. And it could be actually two different things. So we discuss all the stress management techniques during these trainings. And so by the end of it, you come out and you have a very clear picture, very organized. What are the stress management techniques? What are the ones that work for me? How to look out for burnout? And what are the ways to prevent it from the HR side, kind of from the management side, and from the employee side? These are 2 different trainings, right? Because if we talk about the workload is a huge kind of reason for burnout, cause of a burnout, I would say. It is 2 different ways to manage it. From the employer perspective, establishing the channels of communication, making sure people have resources, and from the employee side, making sure there's no distractions, making sure, right? So,
do you feel like, on that topic, was something that we've mentioned a bunch in the past on this podcast, there's a monthly thing that we do on Recruiting EQ, which is called the Success and Wellness Panel, which is not experts like yourself. That's why I'm glad that we have you on to talk about this, because you guys have research and an entire company behind this. But this is just regular people talking about how they cope with stress, right, in the workplace. And most of the people are ones who are the most successful, or ones who are entrepreneurs who've started their own thing. Do you find that it's the more ambitious people who tend to exhibit the symptoms of burnout, or is there no correlation there really?
There are certainly people that are at risk, and high achievers and ambitious people are at a higher risk of a burnout. And at even the highest risk of a burnout are perfectionists. And this is something I work with myself a lot. I'm a huge perfectionist, trying now to, this year especially, to be imperfect, because now I have 3 kids and it's impossible to be perfect. So I try to manage my stress in house, try to calm myself down using stress management techniques in the moments of absolute house. So yes, ambitious people are more likely to burn out, but they also are more likely to be able to learn the skill, apply the skills, and be good at stress management.
Yeah, that's a good point too, right? Because ambitious people and perfectionists, you can turn that over and be like, okay, I'm going to be really amazing at stress management now. That's what I'm going to do. It's my next goal, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Alla, you mentioned before that you yourself were going through burnout. You sort of were able to diagnose it, catch it, find a solution, knowing that you needed to do more physical activity and that tennis was your sport, but then also knew that there was going to be a stigma around it in your workplace at the time. So had the foresight to lie essentially and give them like a physical thing, because you knew that would actually work.
Exactly.
But then it was for the greater good, because it sounds like that solution worked for you and you were able to bring yourself back into a situation of health. How were you able to tell that this was the route to go, like that this is what you needed?
Well, I was aware at the time that there's different ways I can take. I knew that I can start drinking, I can start, partying, I can do all different things, but I knew that there's something I can do for my body and for my mental health that is not going to hurt me. It's going to actually make me better and stronger. And because I played sports as a kid, I always knew that sport is something that makes you resilient and stronger. So that was the way. And then after I want to touch this topic, I went to G20 to present Burnout Company, and I interviewed hundreds, more than that, of entrepreneurs. And it was very interesting that every person I talked to told me they went through burnout, and most of them went silently through burnout. So they didn't share it with anyone. So that was interesting because, as an entrepreneur, you, at some point of your life, I'm sure you will go through burnout. There is a very high likelihood of that.
Interesting. Let's back up to that for a second, because it's true. I mean, I mentioned it even in the post for this podcast episode that you guys became involved with the G20, and you were in Johannesburg recently. And again, you'd interviewed interpreters, and you. How did you guys become involved with the G20? I love that you were there. It seems like a pretty awesome thing to pull off. Like, how did you guys pull this off?
So actually, I was part of G20 back in the days with Fine Staffing Solutions in Australia, in Beijing. So we're already friends of G20 YA, let's put it this way. And so with a new venture, Alla traveled to present Burnout Lab, and also the main goal of this trip was to do the survey, which was well-being, burnout and entrepreneurs, and its association with digital well-being. So we're measuring digital habits, how they're using their phones, with the levels of burnout, and it's still ongoing. We have already over 200 responses, thanks to Alla. She was just phenomenal.
Nice.
And it's a long survey, and it's difficult to get people to fill out those long surveys. We didn't go to any of those companies that have this kind of ghost people filling out. These are actual people, so I cannot wait to see what the research will say, what the analysis will say.
Yeah, that I would love to hear it. I'm fascinated by that as well. I wait for the day when people talk about digital behavior in the same way they talk about any other addiction, which is basically just, anytime you have an undesirable or uncomfortable feeling, you get a hit of dopamine. So your phone isn't quite as damaging as doing cocaine or whatever else is going to do the same thing, but it's essentially the same principle, right? It's the same core numbing out of your feelings, or not sitting in your feelings and upping your distress tolerance, as we were saying before, right? So it's interesting that it's like, if you lower your distress tolerance, I have to imagine that you burn out easier, because you have a lower tolerance for stress and you don't have stress management tools. Is that kind of how it works, or how would you describe the relationship?
Yes, yes, certainly. You're right on. And thanks for liking the topic of digital well-being so much. Do you think that everyone is addicted to their phones? Like, do you genuinely think that?
I don't think everyone's addicted to their phones, and I don't think that everyone uses their phones the same way, based on what I've observed, for sure. And I know my relationship to my phones and social media has changed over the years, and I think other people's has as well, right? But I think that there is, with the way that apps have become a lot more cunning at keeping people's eyeballs glued to them, particularly things like Instagram and TikTok. I feel like it's becoming that. No, I mean, that's just my thoughts. What does the research say? Tell me.
Uh, well, I believe that many people are addicted to their phones, and now kids are also, especially here in Asia, you see that a lot. A lot of kids are on their phones, and even the small kids that are not on the phones, they're drawing phones and they're modeling the behavior of adults, just because they see adults having a phone in their hand. Kind of, they call it digital pacifier in one of those Netflix movies, and that's
Right.
exactly what it is, a digital pacifier. I do believe that many people are addicted, even though the relationship with the platforms is changing, and platforms are, quite dangerous when you don't use them properly, when you don't set those boundaries. So it is definitely adding up to that stress. It is, it is making people burn out faster. You're right on.
So what are some strategies then? Let's flip things to the positive to an extent, because I also agree with you that I think that this is something that education can really help, if people are aware that some behaviors are lowering their distress tolerance, raising their risk of burnout, making them more stressed out. How can we? What kind of skills can people employ to sort of even tell when they're starting to burn out?
Mhm. So I believe that the first step is to understand that burnout is accumulated chronic stress, right? There is acute stress, which is short-lived. There is there's a light in the end of the tunnel, for example, when you have a date or an important event, and there's chronic stress. Chronic stress lives with us, lives under our skin. It could be our body image, relationship at home with your husband or wife. It could be toxic environment at work. And so that chronic stress, if not managed successfully by yourself, which means recovery, coping, and by your organization, right? The leadership changing a few things to put human in the center. If this is unmanaged, you're going to burn out. It really takes two to tango in this situation. Earlier research says, burnout is an individual problem, which means a yoga class would help, or like,
Right.
right, some of the habits. But now it is that interaction between a person and their work. So there's work to do on both sides. And so when we know that burnout is accumulated chronic stress, we work with stress. So we learn to manage stress. There are so many stress management techniques. There's a lot of science behind so many of them. There are reappraisal techniques, when we try to look at situation a different way. We work with therapists, but a lot of times we work with ourselves to understand how to reframe ourselves, to think about something differently. There are coping strategies such as laughing, crying, social interaction, affirmations. There are many of them. There are relaxation strategies, relaxation response. This is anything that makes you relax. And the fourth one is lifestyle behaviors. This is something we do: morning ritual, sleep hygiene, hydration, our diet, exercise routine, anything that makes us more resilient to a burnout. And so knowing this kind of 4 categories help you manage your daily stress. And when you're strong at managing your daily stress, you're less likely to burn out. Does it make sense?
Makes total sense. It makes total sense. Do you think that there's a world wherein this whole topic is taught in schools in the West as well? Because I don't know if people are getting this kind of information early enough.
Well, I know that in, for example, IB programs, international schools are teaching stress management. I'm not sure at which level. Here, I speak to UWC College, and we talk about digital well-being, mental stress, and I know they do a lot for the kids. I'm sure that in the West, they also teach these things. I'm not sure about the public schools. And there are good news. There's so many good news. Like there are people are talking about it. It's everywhere. There are chief well-being officers position. You can see it more and more often. Recently, we took Fortune 500 companies and collected all the chief well-being officers from those companies, and now we're trying to get ethical approval to try and interview some of them to understand how these positions were created.
Yeah.
There are policies, in France, there are offline hours at work that are enforced, and your employer cannot message you after a certain hour. There is a workplace fairness bill here in Singapore. So there are things that are happening in the world to help educate people on that, and there should be more of this. And the more we talk about it, the more we share this information, and I think there will be more of that.
Yeah, that's amazing. I hope that education and that this, it's one of the reasons why I do this podcast, why we do it at Raymond George, and why we, a lot of recruiting people and salespeople and marketing people are happy to talk about the topic, because otherwise it ends up just being a lot of people in those fields being a bit miserable and not really being vulnerable. Like instead they're just complaining. They're like, well, yeah, that's it. This is just life. Life is just you work 80 hours a week and then you never retire and then you just die miserable. You know what I mean? And you're like, Jesus, we don't need to be like this, right? Like,
yeah.
And I think a lot of people are like, oh, the solutions are, it's because of the government. If we changed government, then I wouldn't be stressed anymore. It's because of COVID. If COVID never happened, then I wouldn't be stressed anymore. It's because of social media. If social media didn't exist, then I wouldn't be stressed. But there are all these very big ideas that obviously we can't make disappear. But I think the good news from everything you're saying is that, on a personal level, stress management is something that's very doable if we just have the proper techniques and the proper self-diagnosis to see like, hey, these are the things that are contributing to my burnout, to my stress.
Yeah, and also on the organizational level, we call it I call it human sustainable leadership. It's not yet a scientific term, but I would love it to be.
I love that.
Because sustainability is not only about the environment, right? There is that social aspect of it. And the question is, do we look enough at the social, or whenever someone says sustainability, we think environment. So human sustainable leadership is leading in a way that puts human in the center. Doesn't mean it's all about leisure and rest, but it is finding that integration into work and life. Because if we are, as an employer, taking so many hours from an employee, why can't we get involved in the stress management? Why can't we, for example, if we consult some of the companies, mid-sized companies, and we offer them to have an in-house chef instead of having this luxury restaurant outings with lots of drinking. I'm not judging drinking; it's fine for celebration, but why not have a chef where you can give healthy meals to your employees? And some people are doing that. Why not have blood tests from the executive suite? Why not educate managers on how to lead people in a way that keeps them resilient?
Yeah. Do you find there's difficulty with people? Like, I think that, let me try and say this delicately. I feel like we live in a culture where we are kind of in an echo chamber with our phones and our our wants and likes are supported and whatever by what we see on our phones and in the media all the time, right? So I think that people are in this kind of individualism reality where their opinion and their thoughts and their likes are important to them, and they don't like to have them challenged because they feel supported in them. Meaning, if someone wants to eat cheeseburgers every single day, they're going to be like, well, screw you for saying that that's the source of my stress, that I eat junk food. It's because my boss is a jerk. I'm going to eat cheeseburgers every day. Screw this healthy chef. I want to go drinking, whatever else, because they feel like they're in the right. Do you know what I mean? Like, do you feel that this is a challenge to helping people with their stress is, again, the sort of non-connection between those kinds of behaviors as being self-destructive even in the first place?
Of course. Of course. And this is the challenge, because any change is difficult. And our longevity kind of well-being journey in my family has taken place for years. And it doesn't mean we don't eat burgers. We just kind of incrementally, little by little, improve our lifestyle. And that's works the same way for an organization. If a one manager starts asking about managing stress, if a one manager will start standing up and going for a run to set an example, or making sure they do all these burnout prevention best practices that we talk about in our training in their organization, and then they'll see a small change. And if they continue pushing it, they'll see what happens. And if everyone is having, and it's really that golden rule, half plate vegetable, 1/4, what it is, the happy plate.
Yeah.
We check in, we're not nutritionists, but we work with nutritionists, and we don't go for we only ask for the basic things to respect our bodies and give them what they need to function properly. That's it. And that helps us become more resilient to stress.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. And also helps, not be as fatigued, and helps not get as many flu viruses and all the other things that can impact stress and productivity and success and all this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Certainly. Biological well-being, it plays a huge role in that. How can a woman with no iron work and be happy?
Yeah, that's not good.
These things we check in on. Yeah.
So how does Burnout Lab work then? Do you guys approach companies for this? Do they approach you? Do you also deal with groups of individuals, or is it largely business to business? How do you guys go about spreading the word?
Yeah, so we have things that we do for companies and for individuals. For companies, we have a menu of trainings and webinars, which we present ourselves, and also we have consultants like financial well-being. We're working with a consultant who helps us on this topic because we have no one in-house. And so we do these trainings for companies. We come in and whatever I shared before, 8 hours or 4 hours or a small webinar on the topic, whatever company needs. And then we do consulting. Whenever you have a specific issue, you can schedule consulting hours. If some employee is demanding something, if there's a trick concerning kind of well-being, you can also consult with us. There are offsites and retreats that we run. We currently do them in Japan, Kochi, and close to Osaka, and in Switzerland. Only 2 locations for now, but we plan to do a retreat in Canada, in Mexico, in all these 5 locations that I named to you before we started recording. And so this is for companies. For individuals, we have a list of coaches that you can reach out to. Cool. And they'll coach you through, it could be stress management coaching or anything like that. And we have retreats for individuals as well. So for example, there's 2 retreats we're running during Sakura season, end of March, beginning of April in Kochi, Japan. So we still have, I think, 7 slots from the 31st of March until 6th of April. So we're inviting individuals who think they're on the brink of a burnout or extremely stressed to go into this journey with us. And I'm happy to share the brochure with you, Rick, later.
Yeah, please do. Please do. I feel like there's, since I've started to change my own habits. And like you're saying, it's a journey through, you know, various things, therapy, becoming sober completely, and so on and whatever else, and just exercising more and all that stuff. I do feel that I can sort of tell when it's like, yeah, you know what? I'm looking at the computer and I'm blinking a lot and I'm not seeing what's on it anymore. You know what I mean? Like I have my own things where I'm like, I'm just not, I'm slurring my words. And I'm not obviously drinking anymore, so it's not good if I'm slurring my words. I'm noticing that I'm burning out a little bit, right? I'm stressed. And so I will try to do those kinds of healthy behaviors that will help me, you know, get back into a state of health. But then I do find, and sometimes that means like, no, I'm not going to work 10 hours today, right? I'm going to try to reduce my workload for a day and then work more when I'm feeling better. And I find that one day of feeling at optimal performance is better than 5 days when I'm half burned out of work, right? Like the quality of what I'm able to do in one day. Is that the statistic really? Well, like not exactly, but you know what I'm saying? Is that what you see as well? That people at optimal performance they're just killing it compared to grinding out more hours while feeling burnt out?
Of course, yes. You said it. I mean, there is this scientist. She does sleep seminars for the executives, and she talks a lot about the optimal performance in the executive space. How important is sleep for the management, for all of us? Of course, yes. I agree with you with 100%, and research says the same.
Because there's definitely. Sorry, go ahead, Ala.
Another thing that Aksinia shared with me and I loved and I used for myself, it's focus sprints. When you set some time in the day where you know you're focused, you switch off your phone, you switch off your social media, and you just focus. And that actually helped me a lot as well. Because you know in this hour or these 2 hours, you are in your focus mode and that's what you're doing. And then you allow yourself a little bit of distraction and then you know that there's going to be another focus time for you. Right, Aksinia?
Yes, it's called the flow. Yeah, the flow, establishing a flow. It's a famous book. But I love what you're doing, Rick. I'm so happy you're also on this journey, and you have that awareness that what you need, and you're doing what you're here, your own body. It's amazing.
Well, yeah, no, thank you. And it was probably a quarter century of self-destructive behavior, and then wondering why I wasn't as successful, right? So I think it's it's now very clear that, you know, taking care of yourself, all the things they tell you to do, eating healthy and taking care of yourself, meditating, having, you know, community and healthy relationships and healthy boundaries and all of those things make you more successful as well. It's this weird thing where it's like if you only go to yoga classes and meditate because you want to make more money, it's not going to work, right? Because you're not actually taking care of yourself. And then people say, oh, you know what? Meditation's all crap. Like it doesn't work at all. I meditated every single day for 2 months and I didn't make any more money. It's like, well, that's really not how it works, right? Like, but I do also feel that there's a correlation. And like you guys both said it, investing in, you know, well-being in the workplace. We have, like 12 minutes left, and I usually go down this road every episode. So I'm going to do the same thing here. What do you guys think about how the advent of AI is changing the workplace in a lot of different ways? I feel like it's an opportunity to look at the more human quality of what a job is, what work tasks are. Do you think this is an opportunity for us to sort of refocus in the workforce around the human? Like, I can't remember the words you used exactly, but to put the human at the center. Was again a human sustainable
leadership? Yeah.
There you
go. Not yet a term, but yeah, I agree with you. I mean, it is definitely changing. AI is taking some jobs, changing some jobs, creating new jobs. There's always that yin-yang, good and bad. But certainly empathy is something AI doesn't have, and some of other human qualities. And we should be focusing on the human side of us. And we now get so excited when we talk to humans. We get so excited when we receive emails that are written by humans, because we can see when it's not. And so, yeah, I agree with you.
Ala, can I ask you, what were some of the things that surprised you about your many surveys that you gave? And like, what were your big revelations from all the surveys that you gave in Johannesburg?
Well, I was very surprised how many time people spend on their phones. So after they'll do the survey, I'll ask them some questions, and people would spend on average, entrepreneurs, 5 to 8 hours a day on their phone. This is scary, very scary to me. And this is unhealthy. And well, they would try to justify that, telling me that, well, we work from our phone, or we work while using our phone, so it's normal, but it's not normal.
Well, yeah, like just to clarify, then were they using it to translate? Or was it just like
No,
what was
just
the context?
well, we'll ask how many time you spend. We'll ask a question. So how many times a day would you spend on your phone? And they would spend, well, sometimes they will check their history and they'll tell me, well, it's actually 8 hours a day or 5 hours a day. So, and that's not a healthy number. That's not something that it should not be a normality. It should not be normal, because it's not. And another thing that surprised me, of course, that every single person I talked to had a burnout at some point of their life. And they also told me that they believe, when I asked them question, what do you believe helps you prevent burnout? And they told me that they don't know the techniques. They don't know how to deal with that. And that's something that I believe, if, let's say, a CEO of the company is burned out, that's going to affect so many people in the company. It's not just one person. It's everyone who is working with that person. So we have to be very careful, especially when we talk to entrepreneurs. And they have to be aware of the techniques of what to do when you're burned out, and be self-aware to understand when you're burned out as well, because that's going to affect other people that are working for you.
Yeah, that's true. How many people did you interview again?
More than 100.
More than 100 people, and every single one of them had a burnout
Every single person, yes, correct.
Yeah, that's not good.
But again, it's a bit of an overused word. It might not be a total burnout. We don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, like I mean, I know that I personally experienced a total burnout certainly once, because medically they were like, we'll have to hospitalize you soon. Like, and I was also, I had sleep deprivation to the point where I almost had liver failure. So yeah, and I was 19 years old, and it was true. I just wasn't sleeping. I was working a night job. I was working a day job. I started a business. So I do get it. And I was hallucinating, right? It was like I was, not on drugs, but I was hallucinating. Like, I was at one job and I got up and thought I was getting into the subway at some point. I'm like, oh no, wait, I'm at work. I'm supposed to be on the radio now. You know what I mean? Because I'm overnight. So like, you do get some pretty extreme symptoms if you push it far enough.
Exactly. Yeah. I've heard hallucination a lot. Yeah.
But it's interesting though, that even if it is an overused term, right? It's just that everybody's like, oh yeah, I've had a burnout.
I've had it at some point of their life. Exactly.
At some point in their life, right? Even if it's going to be different levels and small levels, I think that speaks loudly that everybody's like identifying as having had a burnout. It means that they're at least noticing that they have pretty serious stress-related symptoms.
I'm not sure, because when people are overusing it without actually experiencing what it is, then maybe not putting enough seriousness on it, because I do have to send people obviously to a medical therapist, because I cannot handle the cases that you have described. I have to send a person to a facility. But there are cases when it's not really burnout, it's just kind of accumulated chronic stress. Just help a person identify what's the stressor. We show them what are the kind of the stressors could be, and then the person identifies two. In a lot of cases, it's a value mismatch, when it's fundamentally person is doing something he shouldn't be doing. This heart is not aligned with the job. And then a person starts kind of slowly getting out of it by improving the habits and improving the well-being, and it's not necessary to send them to a facility. But in cases when, that people need to also understand that it's a very serious syndrome.
Yeah, definitely. It can be for sure, right? And
Can
I
be.
think I'm curious about, you mentioned something just now about like when people are perhaps doing the wrong thing, right? Their heart's not in, they're doing the wrong thing every single day that they're not well suited to do. And that's part of their burnout. How do you guys go about determining that and having that conversation with someone?
So kind of to begin with, burnout syndrome, we know that syndrome is different from an illness. Usually there's a few symptoms running together. So an exact cause of a burnout is not known. That's why there's so much research of what could it be. Christina Maslach did a big study, and they've identified 6 main reasons for burnout. One of them is a workload, when the workload is unmanageable. Number 2 is when you're being micromanaged, so it's perceived lack of control. When someone is micromanaging you, it also can create this chronic stress turning into burnout. I'll speed up. There is a toxic social environment. There is lack of fairness when someone is treated unfairly. And then there is values mismatch, right? This is number 6. And values is when you are either, let's say, you have few university degrees, but you work at McDonald's, so you're very underskilled, or you're doing something you're not aligned with, like your personal values, your upbringing, everything you are is not aligned where you're actually sitting. And that is a constant chronic stress that keeps bothering you. I shouldn't be doing this in the first place.
Yeah.
And that's when I saw people, my partner in Kochi, actually, he had a burnout, and he has this transformational spiritual journey that led him to quit everything and move to Japan. And now he's the happiest person. And that's why I also encourage to join us at the retreat, because he shares his journey. And it's beautiful when the person finds the right place for them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I don't know if you guys can relate to this, but when I switched into doing recruitment after doing other jobs that I didn't like, you know, some jobs, I've said this before on the podcast, so forgive me for repeating myself, but it's like you show up at 8 o'clock in the morning and then you're just kind of like, please be 9:30, please be 9:30, please be 9:30. I need to go on break. 8:45. Oh my God. Like you just can't get through it. And now doing recruitment, it's like I get up early to start on purpose voluntarily. And then I'm like, oh my God, it's 4 p.m. already. You know what I mean? It just flies by. Like, so that is something too, is when you're doing something that aligns well with you. I mean, you can do a lot more and not burn out. Meanwhile,
100%. You wake up without an alarm. Yeah, you're passionate.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, both of you. Any final words of advice or anything that you would like to give people who are maybe listening to this and cluing into this stuff for the first time?
I think we'll just leave you with some tips on how to overcome burnout if you think you are burnt out. So number 1 is kind of identifying your stressors. What is that chronic stress that caused the burnout in the first place? And identifying your own kind of issues, and also addressing the workplace issues. What is it in your workplace that's making you burn out? Mm-hmm. For some people, it's a lot of times changing the workplace. For some people, it's finding a new meaning in life. Definitely improving habits and different pillars of well-being. A lot of times working with therapist or a coach, learning the stress management techniques, addressing some of the personality traits that we talked about, such as perfectionism, and receiving adequate recovery, which takes sometimes 6 months, even when it's a real burnout, 6 months to a year. I just want to leave you with these few tips.
That's great. That's beautiful. Thanks very much to you both. It's been a pleasure having you. Hopefully we'll have both of you back together or individually on our panels in the future. Everybody who's listening to this, don't burn out. All I can say, don't do it. I've done it. We've all done it. It's no fun. Just don't do it. Seek help. Thanks very much, you guys. And
thanks, Rick. It's great to meet you. Yeah.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.